If you're new here, my name is RuthAnn. My husband Lance was a service-connected, disabled U.S. Navy veteran. He was sick for 25 of the 27 years we were together, and for the last 12 years of his life, I was his full-time caregiver. This podcast is about caregiving in all its forms. My friend Jenna joins me to share her perspective as a stay-at-home mom who homeschooled her 5 children. At first, our lives seem very different, but we found we actually have a lot in common. So we share what connects us, hoping it helps you find your connections too. Today, we're going to talk about sacrifices. We all make sacrifices in life, no matter what. But as a caregiver, I gave up so many things. I gave up having children. I gave up having a career. I gave up my individuality. I became Lance's caregiver. By the time he passed away, I didn't even remember many of the things that I liked before he got sick because I had sacrificed so much. And I'm not saying that sacrifice is a bad thing. I did it because I loved him, but I do want to recognize the sacrifices that people make, because I heard a lot of people through the years while I cared for Lance, well, you did marry him for better or for worse. And that's actually not a really nice thing to say. And it wasn't helpful either. And I think there's also an idea that when you're caring for someone that you love, because I loved Lance with all my heart. He was my best friend. We had a great relationship before he got sick. And there's some idea that just because we had that good relationship, that caregiving for me was easy. And that's not the case. And having people in our life who simply recognized, acknowledged that I was making these sacrifices made it easier to continue doing that. It made me feel understood and supported, and it made me feel like my life mattered. Those other comments did not make me feel like that. So Jenna's here to talk about sacrifices with me. Hi, Jenna.
Hello. It's good to see you. What a oh boy, what a big topic. When we first started kind of thinking about this episode and I was, writing about it and kind of thinking about what I would want to say or what I think about sacrifice, I was reminded of just my interactions with raising my kids and talking about sacrifice, because I felt like this was such an important part of their character development. I would kind of reference it pretty frequently. And one of the things that we would have come up is my kids would have to do they would have to do community service for school. That was part of the requirement for their school, is they had to complete so many hours of community service. And I can remember them coming home with these opportunities to do community service, and they weren't always what I would consider service. It was like fun things going. I remember one of them was they would go play with cats at this cat shelter, and that was considered community service. And I remember it prompted conversations about service, and that service necessarily requires sacrifice, or it's not real service. It's just going and playing with cats for fun. So we talked about service and sacrifice a lot. And we would talk about your attitude toward sacrifice. And I would bring up a comment that I made a lot while they were little. And it was that doing something with a bad attitude is the same as not doing it at all. And even though that isn't technically true, like you still get the thing done, it still happens. Your attitude really kind of determines what that looks like and how it impacts you and how it impacts the people around you, not least of all the person that you're caring for. And it's funny that you mentioned people kind of saying, well, you signed up for better, for worse. You signed up for this. Like, okay, no, I didn't, not any more than anyone else did. I would get the same thing because I had 5 kids. Well, you're the one that chose to have all these kids. okay, but I can choose to raise them well, or I can choose to just barely get by. And choosing to raise them well requires a lot of sacrifice on my part. And I am glad to do that. But like you said, it does help to have people around you that look at it and see that you're making that effort, that you're doing it with a good attitude, that you're genuinely sacrificing and not doing it begrudgingly. Because I think then it's just this kind of weird action that, I don't know, I think it makes everyone around feel kind of awful at the end of it.
Well, and I think that when people make those comments too, you signed up for better or for worse, or you did this for better or for worse, that changes your attitude on your sacrifice too, because you feel like if if everybody feels this way, then what's the point? I mean, I know why I was doing it. I did it because I loved him and I wanted him to have the best life possible. But it does not help to have people making negative comments or making rude comments.
Well, it doesn't help, and it just creates more that you have to work through as the caregiver. So not only is it not helpful, I think it's actually harmful. So I think we've talked about, boundaries and how important that is. So I think kind of surrounding yourself with people who are encouraging this is yet another reason why that is essential if you're trying to get through something. But I think keeping your attitude in check while you're going through these tough things, and making sure that this is a willing sacrifice on your part, that you're willing to do this for this other person. When it's voluntary, it helps keep some of that resentment out of it. We've talked about, your mindset, and I get to do this. I get to take care of this person. I am so thankful to sacrifice, for me, whatever, for me personally, it was, I, I'll tell you a little story. Something that happens when you're a parent is, say you go through a store and you see a cute pair of shoes that you like, and you put them in your basket and you think like, ooh, these shoes are really cute. I'm gonna look so cute in these. And then you get a little further down, you get in the kids' department and you see a really cute pair of shoes that all shoes are much cuter when they're this big. Um, and you put those in your basket for your child. And you sit there and you look at the two of them and you say, well, I can only afford one pair of shoes. Do I get them for me or do I get them for my child? And you got to make a decision. And a lot of times that involves sacrifice. And you say, like, I don't need these shoes. These little ones are cuter anyway. But it's that with how you're going to spend your money, how you're going to spend your time getting up at 2 a.m. Like, this caring for Lance, getting up at 2 a.m. because somebody's throwing up and you just want to sleep. But this little person who's completely helpless in your situation, a big person that needed your help, it's like if you do it with a bad attitude, like, man, they feel that. They feel it.
Right. And that ties in with self-care too. And I think you might have mentioned that, but knowing your limitations, that's that self-awareness that we just talked about. Knowing your limitations allows you to set aside time for yourself for self-care so that when you do make those sacrifices, you don't become bitter. You can't give up yourself completely. You can't sacrifice 100% of yourself to care for someone else. You still have to take care of yourself. Otherwise, the sacrifices are going to be for nothing because you're going to be bitter and angry, and it's going to affect everyone negatively.
Well, and I would even submit that if you are bitter or angry or resentful about it, it's not really sacrifice anymore. It's slavery at that point. You're being forced to do something that you don't want to do. And that's not good for anybody.
I think that's a really good point. And if people are feeling like that, like their sacrifice has turned into anger and bitterness, that they've become a slave to it, then it's time to reassess the situation and start looking at whether you've been isolating yourself. Are you still spending time with people that matter to you? Are you spending time with the right kind of people? Because surrounding yourself with the right kind of people, as you've said, Jenna, is essential. You can't be surrounding yourself with negative people who criticize and judge everything that you do and then go home and be an effective caregiver or parent or whatever it is. You need to surround yourself with encouraging, supportive people who are there for you to walk through those really challenging times with you. And that's really, really important. And that's part of self-care. So if you do get to that point where you're feeling like you're bitter, angry because of the sacrifices you're making, then stop and look at what you can change. Because in a lot of these situations, the only thing that you can change is your attitude. Unfortunately, I'm very aware of that. I went through that for many years with Lance. And it's not an easy thing to do, but when you're able to do it, it does make life so much easier for everyone around you.
I think that is really the point, is you are the only thing that you really truly have any control over. And that is your attitude and the words you say to yourself. Like, that's so important. And I think we've talked about this, but going down the path of negative self-talk is really dangerous. And I think I shared this with you at some point, this idea of being emotionally self-indulgent. And I think about that from time to time, about feeling sorry for myself and wallowing maybe. And sometimes that feels like this really comfortable, warm blanket of self-pity that I've been there. Oh my gosh, have I been there? And feeling sorry for myself feels kind of good for a minute, but it takes me down a path that's so destructive. It's so ugly. It's so gross. And I look at myself in the mirror and go, well, I don't even want to look at myself in the mirror because I don't like the me that emerges from all that negative self-talk and that emotional self-indulgence. I don't like it.
Well, I think a way to turn that attitude around when you start feeling like that is to really look at the situation and find meaning and purpose in it, because that really is the whole reason behind it. That was the reason that I cared for Lance all those years. Is the purpose behind it was so that he would have the best life possible. And looking back on it, I'm so glad that I'm able to see the times when my attitude was good, how good his life was. But I can also look back and see the times when my attitude was not so great, and those were not great moments, and I don't like remembering those. So looking at sacrifice as meaningful and rewarding is really the way to go.
I think the other piece of that is you can come out the other end of it without a ton of regret because you don't get a second chance at it. So when you're offered this opportunity to sacrifice parts of yourself for the betterment of someone else, I think it's really important to kind of assess that and say, is this something I can take on? Is it something I'm willing to take on? And then knowing that, like you said, you have that purpose and that meaning behind it kind of gets you through the really tough times. And it kind of helps you to avoid that negative self-talk, that self-pity, because you say, like, there's a purpose in me doing this, not least of all to get to the other end and know that you've done well, that you finished well. It doesn't mean it was perfect. It doesn't mean you got it right all the time. It just means that you genuinely sacrificed for someone else and you feel so much better about that. You don't have all this regret that you're carrying forward with you in your life.
That's so true. One of the things that really helped me when I would get in those times where I just was feeling so burned out and I was feeling a little bit bitter or feeling a little bit angry, I would stop myself and think, I need to live with this for the rest of my life, because I knew that Lance was dying. He was dying for a long time. And so I didn't want that to be the feeling that I was left with or the thought that I was left with. And looking back, I mean, there are moments like that, but when I would get to that point where I would feel like I can't do this anymore and I'm feeling angry and resentful, I would stop and I would have a conversation with Lance and I would say, I'm really sorry. And we would talk about it. And I'm so glad that I was able to do that.
I think I've had the same thing, and maybe it's with my kids, or maybe it's with, other family members or friendships or my marriage, or there's just different places where that is so important to just say, like, hey, I'm at the end of myself right now. I'm not doing so hot. I'm going to make an attitude adjustment. I'm sorry. We're going to move forward better. Because when I allow that negativity, the resentment, I don't know, I think it's just feeling sorry for myself, I guess. In a moment, I feel sorry for myself. And I think, well, I've been doing all these things and I've been taking care of this, that, and the other thing, and sacrificing and I've been making all these sacrifices and no one else is. And I'm the only one. And oh my gosh, that just devolves into this really gross place that I don't want to go. So maybe it's like seeing it in other people, or maybe it's having seen it in myself. I don't, if I'm really honest anymore, I don't get very far down that road before I have to catch myself, because I go, oh, I know where that goes. And it's pretty much like a mud hole dump, right? It's like not a very pleasant place to be. So I am better able, the older I get, to draw myself back quickly, because I don't want to go there. And just being honest with the other person about it, whether it is my kids or whether it's my spouse or whether it's my, family or my friends, my coworkers, whatever it is. I'm just like, sorry, my bad. I'm going to change my attitude. And it just changes everything. It changes everything. And then I'm like back in the saddle and ready to go again. And like I said, I can move forward without having all this regret and, oh, I should have done this, or I wish I had done that. No, I made the corrections in the moment and now I can move forward. That's a positive thing.
I think that's another really important point, is recognizing when you do see yourself falling into that trap, that you correct it so that you don't carry that regret with you. And that's a really important thing. We all make sacrifices. Every single person in this world makes some kind of sacrifice. When you're making the really big sacrifices, it's important to find that meaning and purpose. And as a caregiver, like I've already said, make sure that you're taking time for self-care. Make sure that you're spending time with other people and that you're not isolating too much. And if things are really bad, maybe see a counselor. That's something that really helped me. I hope that this is another helpful episode. And thanks so much for joining me, Jenna. I'll see you next time.
All righty. We'll see you. Bye.